Hello, hello, hello. It is week 11. Like 10 and 1, 11. Okay, it's week 11 in our course. In reality, it's week 10. And this has been already a very interesting week for me, and I suspect for you and for everyone, as I talked about in our week 10 attendance, right? Life is different right now for us as a campus and a campus community, right? We are now coming back from suspended, but we're going to be online. Again, for us, easy breezy. We already do it, no problem. So, the one thing though, this has affected for me personally, as I alluded to in week 10 attendance, is that today is Wednesday and not a big impact. I normally do this learn together work on Tuesday, but I've spent Monday and Tuesday working with other faculty for helping them come up to speed and with some of the newer um, platforms that the campus is using, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Okay. So we are on track this week. And the reason I brought up the calendar that we are looking at right here, okay, is that because you're going to be watching this in week 11, and week 11 blends right next. So next week, depending on when you're watching this, next week, week 12, the week before we go out to spring break, is our second dev. Okay. So I have an assignment for you today. I'll go over in a minute. But I've been thinking about it and thinking about the context of what we're all going through. And the thing is, it's different for each one of us, but I know collectively there's a huge amount of change going on. So I want to make this offer to you. If you have had a major impact to your life and it would really be beneficial for you to do the code review after spring break, then I want you to reach out to me and have a conversation. Okay. But my hope is that most of us can go ahead and do this code review as I've scheduled it, right, to be due on Thursday, April 2nd. But I'm really trying to give some flexibility for those who, and all I need you to do is just articulate with me or just have a conversation with me that says, hey, my life has been completely upthrown. I haven't had the time to focus on this because the idea is I want you to do well, right? And then you and I can have a conversation about this. I'm really open to being flexible. I don't want to just say everyone has the ability to do it after because everyone will. Well, I don't know. You shouldn't say that. I don't know you. I don't know your individual schedule in my head enough to know if that's true. I actually think some of you would continue to do it. But here's going to be the challenge, right? Is that most likely I will do these all online this time, but I am still open to doing them face to face. Okay. Now, having said that, I am putting together, and I'll just click over real quick, the schedule for that. And as you see, I have them online. And actually, the other thing that's going to happen is I'm actually going to use technology I haven't been using that now that I've trained other faculty on it, I'm thinking maybe it'll be cool. So I'm going to use a product called Zoom to do it, to do the individual review sessions. But I'll talk about that more in a video I'll produce for next week. But here's the reason I'm saying this is that even though I have these all online and I'll publish this next, actually at the end of, let me come back over here. So at, since we're here in week 11 attendance, which will be, I will produce soon because it's Wednesday, week 10. So I will release this schedule, but I want you to know that if you have a need to meet face to face, it's still very doable and it's really okay. And you can tell me in that schedule. We can still meet at Fresno City, even though it's not generally open to the public right now. You and I can still meet there. We can still meet at Bitwise, actually. I still have that ability. So you can kind of tell me if you do want to meet me, where you'd want to meet me. Okay. But the way I've been doing code reviews, where I've been doing them using Hangouts, that's the part that I'm going to change, because this is a really good tool, and it's offered up by the campus, and it really works well. So unless something happens during a review, that's my intention, and I'll give you the details for how to do that. In the week on Dev 1, I've already gone over my code for Dev 1 in week 10, actually week 9. Actually, is it in week 9? I did it. Okay. All right. So that's actually going to be the second part of your Learn Together for this week. So part 1, and I'll just go ahead and click into it. Right. So in here, part 1, because the thing is, you are now in the place in the Udemy course where you've learned about arrow functions, which is awesome, right? So I want you to take the code that you wrote for last week and copy it into a new public directory called week 10 W11 in the public repo, and then refactor your functions into arrow functions, right? And then have at least one ternary operator. Actually, I have to do that. I forgot I had that in there. But yeah, because there's definitely, and actually probably the most logical place would be, and actually Andrew's going to show you this anyway. So, and actually this work is kind of a repeat of what you've already done. But the key is I want you to take the work from week 10, right? And then do that to it. So let me show you my output, because I also did something I said I would do, but I didn't get done until today. So what I did, and I'll show you my code in a minute. Here's my modification where I added the input of the name. And what I added was the validation to this. Remember, we all agreed we wouldn't submit code, we wouldn't use forms, or we wouldn't use inputs without some kind of validation. So you saw last week, and by the way, that's I'm going to refresh, because remember I had the required, and the video I gave you for week 9 actually showed this. Remember, in this case, it is back there. But what I also did is if you hit a space and then hit submit, you got name is required. Now, this is the same technique that you saw in the Web Dev Simplified. And then if I do click in there and if I start to enter any text, it clears that. Okay. So then, of course, if I go and hit submit, then it goes into the to-do app, or the to-do page. Okay. So let me just show you that code that I wrote for that. So here's my week 9, oh, by the way, I noticed I should have called last week 10. I called it week 9 because week 10 we didn't have code. Or was it week 9 we didn't have code? Week 10 we didn't have code. Oh, this is right then. Okay, so here, let me go back and look. So here, by the way, I went through and converted all my functions to arrow functions, and they're pretty simple, right? I mean, it's really just, in some ways, it's just getting rid of the function keyword and then placing the new arrow syntax, right? But this becomes more involved when you're handling objects, and he talks about that a bit. And this will be the logical place for me to add a ternary operator right here, and I need to do that. So you'll go through all your code, right? So, but the key I want to show you is just how I did. By the way, I just added a CSS, and then I added that div into the HTML, and then I just made that red, and I made it a little larger. So then in my code for that, so let me just make this a little bigger so you can see this, because this is really just, and this is the technique he was showing us in Web Dev Simplified. So I grab the to-do element, or to-do name, which actually is the form itself. And then I also and then when I say grab, I set up a reference to it, to the error, to the div itself, and then I put in 2 event listeners, 1 event listener on the submit, and then I set up that variable in this block scope. I prevent default. Now I noticed he only prevented default when he was actually handling the success case, but I decided to leave mine here. And then I ended up, because of the way that I set up my reference to the DOM, I used the form versus the actual input. Again, I like that because I can use the required. And then I set up another block scope variable that just points to that value. Now, in this case, I say if value is blank or null. Now, in this case, blank is actually 1 space, right? Because if you just hit submit, that's when it catches the required on the HTML. And then I said, if that's the case, then you push. And I like this idea because you can push multiple messages. Now, in this case, I haven't, and I could definitely, and I probably will rewrite this to at least add length as well, put a minimum length on the name, maybe more than 1 character long. And then if there's something in there, and that's why I went ahead and left this in here, because if I only really did 1 error message, this wouldn't make sense, but I'm going to do more. So I left the code in here. If messages.length is greater than 0, then I just join those together and whatever comes back from that join, meaning multiple items in there, I just put that as the inner text. That's where you saw my error message that I set the CSS on. But I also put in, and by the way, if it's equal to 0, which means there's no errors, then we go ahead and clear that value and location assign to the to-dos for me with the name in there. But I also did put an event listener of input. That way, anytime that input value changes, meaning you've gotten an error and you're going to change it, then I clear that error message so you don't see it. Again, this is not really talking too much about the ideas. Sorry. I can operate a computer. So this wasn't necessarily spending a lot of time, in this case, talking about how to implement arrow functions, because I think Andrew did a great job of that. But I'm just going to tell you in general, you should now, unless there's a reason from here on out, write arrow functions. They're more modern. So when somebody looks at your code, they can clearly see if you're using arrow functions. You're using a more modern version of more modern understanding. And I say version, it's built on the fact that you can use it in the newer versions, which again, we could look at. And by the way, if you don't know this, it's called Can I Use? Matter of fact, let's just do that real quick. So Can I Use is an awesome website for telling us how well HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and also look, it has other web technologies, right? So let's see, can you just do that? Arrow function is totally awesome. So look at this, 94, let's say 95% of all browsers handle no and are able to run the arrow function. Okay, so that's a great percentage. Always good to know what those are. Okay. All right, so your job this week, so give us a link to your working output, right? I need to push my code and I'll give a link in here. Ask me any questions or talk about, have you used Zoom maybe? Do you like it? So again, that's what I'm going to use for the code reviews for next week. Remember, you do not have to wait to set up a meeting with me, right? That's the other thing is that, and I've said this, but I know there may sometimes be a tendency not to, but there's also a tendency to meet with me. So, just hopefully you see value when you come and talk to me about your code and we can talk through that. So just know that let me know when you'd like to talk to me. You're going to have to talk to me next week. And I say that like it's a torture, which I don't think it is. But I also know that you do have to set that up. You have to be prepared for that. So anyway, let's see in the video, I'll discuss topics related to our second code review. So I talked about those. And so I want at least something, by the way, I'm going to put on here, reply to 2 students, right? Put a link to your code. Sorry about that juggling around there. Link to your code. You can discuss, right? Anything about that. When I look at, and I'm actually going to be looking today in the Learn Togethers that I think 2 or 3 have been submitted for week 10. That will be one of the most important things I'll look at is, did you get some working code? What was your modification? Did you implement form validation? Okay. All right. I think that's it. So in your reply, do all those things. Ask any questions about the code review or anything related. Have a great west of your week. Have a great rest of your week. Peace out.